When I was 12 years old, a bus driver asked during a field trip if we wanted him to tell the scariest story ever. The story he told was so terrifying it made everyone faint. No one would say what it was about later, just that it was the scariest thing that any of them had ever heard. Kids spoke of it in whispers, in rumors, but nobody would ever repeat it to me, no matter how I begged or pleaded. I was the only kid on the bus wearing headphones, so I didn't hear it. I had a brand new Walkman. Yes, I'm old. And when all the other kids were telling each other scary stories, I put my headphones on. I can't even remember where the field trip was going. Science museum? Anyway, it was a long drive for a dozen kids. What I do remember is seeing the bus driver, not our regular driver, but a substitute for the field trip, looking up at us in the rear view and asking if we wanted to hear the scariest story in the world. Everyone chorused, "Yes!" really loudly, and the driver kept insisting it was too scary for us. I think I rolled my eyes, and I remember him saying, "This story starts on a county road." Then I tuned him out and turned up the volume on my Walkman, and when the tape got to the end, I realized that the bus around me was silent. I looked up. Every kid sat slack-jawed and wide-eyed. I turned around in my seat to my best friend Isaiah, sitting in the row behind me, and I asked, "Hey, what's going on?" His eyes flicked up to meet mine. He closed his jaw but didn't say anything. "You okay? Why'd it get so quiet?" Somewhere on the bus, a whisper. A few kids up front talked in nervous undertones. I think they said, "Don't tell him," Isaiah said, his voice monotone. "He told us a scary story." "What was it about?" I asked, turning my attention to the driver, who was also silent now, hands on the wheel, saying nothing, though he had a strange expression on his face. His eyes sort of glazed. "Can't tell you," said Isaiah. "Why not?" He didn't answer. Neither did anyone else. It was like whatever they'd heard had so terrified them that they were locked into trauma, just frozen there by this shared, collective, horrifying experience that I'd somehow missed. I don't know if you've ever ridden a bus full of school children, but it is never quiet. There is always chatter. But right then, other than the rumble of the engine, you could have heard a pin drop. What was it about? I repeated louder. At that moment, a horn sounded. Everyone clutched the seats as a truck barreled toward us. Later, I was told the bus drifted into opposing traffic. The truck driver's quick reflexes and veering saved us from a worse accident. But the impact still killed the bus driver, left one student in a coma, spun the bus, and knocked a bunch of us out. Later, the rumor would spread that the bus driver and students all fainted from the story, and that's what caused the crash. Anyway, I remember coming back to myself in my seat, sitting up and seeing the blue sky outside. Seeing the day look so normal except for the steam or smoke from the bus and the truck. I heard sobbing from my classmates. Some of us were sent to the hospital. The rest of us were sent home. Days later, after everyone was back in classes except the kid who fell in a coma, I asked a classmate, "Hey Maria, you heard the story on the bus, right?" She was doodling on a notebook for our math class, but her pen stopped. She said softly, "Yeah." "Was it really scary?" She nodded. "The scariest story you ever heard?" She closed the notebook and moved to a different desk, saying loudly, "I don't want to talk to you, Joshua." Several other kids tittered. I think my cheeks went red. I wasn't a social reject, not exactly, but I wasn't one of the popular kids either. I tried with other kids who'd been on the field trip, but none of them would talk to me about it, not even my best friend Isaiah. He just kept saying, "Nah, man, it's too scary." I snapped, "Dude, just like summarize it if it's too scary. What was it even about?" "I'll tell you when I'm 55. 55. I don't want to have to think about it. Bro, just let it go." His refusal almost broke apart our friendship. But eventually I accepted that nobody was going to tell me whatever had traumatized them so badly. It's a mystery I have agonized over for decades. Just last year, I found a note in my Google Calendar that I apparently made as a reminder to myself, telling me Isaiah's birthday, 55. I reached out, partly to wish him a happy birthday, but also to ask if we could catch up. We hadn't seen each other since our high school reunion, and we arranged to meet for coffee. When I arrived, I was surprised to see his glassy and yellowed eyes. He looked much older than 55. I tried to hide my shock, but he just smiled and said, "Pancreatic cancer. I've got a few months, probably." "Oh," I said. "Oh, shit, I'm sorry. You look good, though." He raised his coffee cup to me. Look like you're still 40 years old. How's life treating you? I pulled up a chair and told him how I'd married and divorced. Same, he said. How I was an electrician and occasionally a freelance writer. He talked about recycling and community gardens and about his 2 grandchildren and how he'd founded a nonprofit because he wanted a better world for them. And as I began to reminisce about our school years, he raised a hand. Before you ask, I'm not going to tell you that bus story, but he shook his head. Told me that the students who heard all wished they hadn't, every single one. Trust me when I tell you, I say this with love, don't ask. If you hear it, you'll wish you hadn't. Brother, let it go. In spite of my disappointment, it was good to see him and catch up. It was also one of the saddest goodbyes I ever said because I knew just by looking at him that it would be the last one. After that conversation, I finally accepted that the mystery would go unsolved. Until yesterday. Yesterday, it happened by pure accident. I finally heard it. The story the bus driver told. I was at a local bar and I overheard from a nearby table a woman say, all telling scary stories, and the driver said, do you want me to tell the scariest story ever? I immediately broke off from my own conversation and craned my neck to see who was speaking. It was a middle-aged woman, and I didn't recognize her at first in the low lighting, but as she kept talking, I realized Maria. This was little Maria. Last I'd seen her, she'd been 12 years old. She'd gone to a different junior high and high school than Isaiah and I, but in her brown, curly hair and the sideways quirk of her mouth when she talked, it was definitely her. Either she'd moved back to our hometown or else, like me, had never left. Small world. The chatter was loud in the bar. I missed her next few words. Are you serious? Gasped a girl at her table. It's all true. Shinji fell into a coma. Devon's stepfather stabbed him. Mitsuko died at her wedding when the cake was smashed into her face and one of the dowels went through her eye. More gasps. All of them happened like the driver said. Isaiah was 55 when the cancer got him, and he and I were the last 2. Oh, but the craziest thing, there was one other kid on the bus who wasn't listening. Her voice got lower, and I had to move closer, walking near her table. The driver saved him for last and said, Joshua dies 3 days after he hears this story. And then the truck hit, just like the driver had told us it would right at the beginning, and poor Shinji fell into his coma. And that poor kid, Joshua never stopped asking. He asked all the time, what was the story? What was the story? We used to joke how if we never told him, maybe he'd never die. A strangled sound escaped my throat, and Maria looked up and I hurried away, and I think she said my name. Isaiah, may he rest in peace, was right. He and the others protected me all these years. Damn it, brother, you were right. I wish I'd never heard. Blake and I hadn't spoken in almost 17 years. He was 6 years older than me, and he always treated me like a kid. When our father died, Blake refused to come to the funeral. He screamed at our mother and told me to go to hell for taking our parents' side. I was left alone to care for our mother for 10 years. When she died, I called Blake. All he said was that she deserved it. The next time I saw him was at the lawyer's office for the will. I completely lost it. Went after him like a madman, threw every insult I had. Blake didn't react to any of it. He said he didn't want the money or the estate. He only wanted the childhood home sold to someone who would promise to tear it to the ground. We got into a violent fight. The police came. It turned ugly. That was the last I saw of him. Then one day, my phone rang. I assumed it was the courier, but the voice on the other end said, "Hey, little brother." My stomach clenched. A whole life I thought I'd buried came crashing back. We talked. Then we talked every week for 6 months. Blake had changed, calmer, older, careful with his words. But what he told me about our parents shook everything I thought I knew. He said they had starved him, locked him in the basement for days, tied up, left to soil himself. Our mother beat him with a leather belt almost every day. Our father preferred to choke him until he passed out. I didn't believe him. Not until a video call when he showed me his back, his legs, his arms, covered in long old scars like whip marks. And his right hand, the joint of his index finger, was missing. He said our father had cut it off with pruning shears when he was 10 years old. Everything I thought I knew about my family collapsed. But doubt crept in too. What if he was lying? Why had our parents never touched me? 17 years is a long time. I had no idea where he'd been or what he'd become. I told Blake all of this. He didn't get angry. Instead, he said he wanted to come see me, that he was sick, heart problems, and wanted to explain everything in person, not just the abuse, but what else happened in that basement, things he'd never told anyone. I agreed. He booked a flight for 2 weeks later. He asked only one thing, that I pick him up at the airport. The day came. I drove to the airport with a mess of emotions I couldn't name: dread, excitement, grief, hope. His plane had been delayed but landed on time. I stood at the exit, watching the crowd, and then I saw him. The furious young man I'd last seen in a courthouse brawl was now walking toward me in the body of an old man, not elderly, but worn down, every year and every scar written on his face. Max. He stopped in front of me. "It's been a long time, little brother." I thought I was going to cry right there in the middle of the airport. I didn't. I swallowed hard, shook his hand, and took his bag. We talked the whole drive. Nothing heavy, just two brothers finally acting like brothers. Then after a stretch of quiet, Blake said, "Could you take me to our old house now?" I told him I needed to stop home first. I'd left my work phone there. He nodded tiredly and said he'd wait in the car. When I suggested he come up, he waved me off. "We'd just get stuck. I want to see the house today." I ran upstairs. My wife and kids were out. I grabbed what I thought was my work phone and headed back to the elevator. My phone rang. It was Blake. I looked down and realized I'd had my work phone on me the whole time. My personal one was what I'd grabbed from the counter. "Blake?" I answered. "I'm almost there." "Where?" His voice sounded exhausted, confused. "Max?" "In the car, with you," I said, stepping into the elevator. "Max." His voice tightened. "I couldn't come. I got sick this morning. I'm at the hospital. I've been calling you for hours." The elevator doors opened. "I never got on the plane," Blake said sharply. "Blake, you're sitting in my car right now." "Max, listen to me." He broke into a coughing fit. Something clattered in the background. When he spoke again, his voice was barely there. Promise me you won't take him back. He can't go back to that house. Promise me." A heavy thud. Then voices. Urgent. Medical. Equipment rattling. The call disconnected. I stepped outside into the winter cold and felt like I was on fire. My car was right there, and someone was sitting in it, still unblinking, staring out the window with dull, unfocused eyes. I couldn't move. Then I saw his hand. The finger joint wasn't missing. The realization came over me like ice water. If that wasn't Blake in my car, then who was it? And why did it look exactly like him? At this hospital, NHS staff suffer abuse every day. I'm no stranger to repugnant words or even physical assaults. I'm no stranger to Tourette's either. There are very few mental or physical conditions I haven't seen over the course of 2 decades. Earlier this morning, in fact, I would have quite confidently told you I'd met every mold and manner of human. I hadn't. Tourette's syndrome is a misunderstood condition. It's a tic disorder, and tics are, in most cases, small muscle convulsions. Only about 1 in 10 sufferers deal with coprolalia, the involuntary vocalization of obscenities deemed socially inappropriate. What most people misunderstand is that sufferers do not choose the words they utter. Their brains spit out the most taboo word or phrase in any given situation, which causes them immense distress, because such vulgarity or cruelty evidently doesn't align with their personality or beliefs. I say evidently, but the nature of the condition wasn't evident to my colleagues when we were entrusted with the post-surgery care of Jessica, an 8-year-old girl with a severe tongue laceration. She was rushed into the hospital by her flustered and red-eyed mother, Liz, a suspicious woman who spent most of the morning looking over her shoulder. "That girl is an absolute monster," said a nurse called Linda. "She just called me a slur." I was empathetic. "I'm sorry." "That's horrible." "Tourette's is a nasty thing, but I promise you the girl didn't mean to say that to you, Linda. Do you want to?" "Yeah." "No shit, but it doesn't excuse her racism. Tourette's is like alcohol. It lowers the inhibitions and tells you what a person really thinks, reveals those dark inside thoughts we want to keep hidden." Lord help me. This person is supposed to be a medical professional, was my immediate thought, but I took a polite tact aloud. Jessica is not a covert racist, Linda, because there was no intent behind the words she used. Her brain convulsed and vomited out the thing she didn't want to say. She called Brian a homophobic slur earlier. I don't care, interrupted Linda. I'll find someone else to do this shift with you because I don't want to be around that vile creature. I'd muzzle her if it were up to me. I was honestly glad my colleague left, given that final admission. I was devastated for the little girl, who kept apologizing with teary eyes and a quivering lip after everything expletive or vile word she uttered to hospital staff. Jessica's tongue had been severed widthways to a halfway point, requiring sutures to knot it back together. She was playing with scissors, and I managed to save her just in time. I brought her straight here, Liz had explained to doctors. Now, given Jessica's injury, I understand her mother's flustered demeanor, but there was something off about the story, or the way Liz told it. It's my duty to report suspicious circumstances, so I told the mother to wait outside whilst I spoke to Jessica, who watched me with doe eyes and quavering lips. Is Mummy telling the truth? I asked her. Her rogue tongue answered, "Fat bitch." I smiled softly to let her know it was okay. The words hurt, of course, but they had no meaning. It was Jessica's pain that hurt me more greatly. She was nearly weeping. Sorry. No need for that. Do you often say sorry to people for the things Tourette's makes you say? The girl nodded. Then I asked the question I really wanted to ask. At home? No response that time. But I pressed. Is that how you really got hurt today, Jessica? Did Mummy get upset with you? No, she said, before clasping her mouth to muffle her troublesomely telltale tongue. Jessica had the beginnings of a bobblehead, juddering about as I took her along a bumpy road of question after question after question. I had to do it. She was clearly wrestling with a secret. I suddenly heard squabbling past the entrance to the ward, and I clocked Liz arguing with a man in the corridor. Then he threw the door to the wall and marched inside. Who are you? I asked. The man stabbed a finger at Jessica, who seemed to clench a little in response. Her father. Come on, Jessica. We're going home. The sad little girl in the blue hospital gown got to her feet without so much as a moment's hesitation, and her meek mother met her at the end of the bed to take her hand. I heard shuffles from nearby beds, shielded by curtains, as curious patients were clearly eavesdropping on the commotion. Let's just have a chat first, I implored as Jessica was led away from me. We need to at least do a discharge assessment to discuss a care plan for the coming weeks. The father smiled at me, but it was a faux smile, like the apology that followed. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am. I'm sure she's been shouting the whole hospital down, hasn't she? She's been fine, I said firmly. Of course she has, he sighed. I think she'll be happier when she's back home, away from all these people, you know? It's not nice for them to hear her. I scowled. It's not nice for her to have to deal with the condition. The father narrowed his eyes, seemingly cross with me for daring challenge him. Right? Well, I think we'll take it from here. Thanks for your help. Time to get the girl back to her proper room. Trapped! Trapped! Screamed Jessica as she pulled away from her mother's hand, limbs convulsing. The girl looked at me in abject terror, and I realized that had been not a cry for help, but a tick. Jessica hadn't wanted to say a thing. This time, she had not involuntarily said something offensive, but something dangerous, something in her eyes that was the worst possible thing to say in that given moment. All this was confirmed by the cold way her father looked at her. Tourette's, was his explanation to me through gritted teeth as he walked to his wife and daughter. Come along, you two. As I watched the parents take their little girl away, I was similarly possessed by dangerous words that jumped from my mouth of their own volition. I knew it was dangerous, but I had to ask. Who tried to cut off your tongue, Jessica? It wasn't a tick this time. The girl was brave enough to answer, Daddy. The man's eyes narrowed at her, then at me. I whimpered fearfully at not only that, but at Jessica being dragged out of the ward by her mother. She knew what would come next. Of course she did. Liz had come into a stiflingly hot hospital ward with a turtleneck jumper up to the chin, forever adjusting the sleeves, seemingly afraid that too much of her skin might show. She was hiding something, just as her daughter had been until Tourette's snatched the reins. I was midway through processing all of that as Jessica's father thrust me against the wall elbow against my windpipe to stifle the scream trying to get out of my open mouth. With his spare hand, he slipped fingers into that open mouth, then took hold of my tongue as if it were a weed to be rooted out. "I could get rid of this," he said matter-of-factly, "and your hands and your eyes. You'd be alive, but you wouldn't be able to find a way to tell a soul what you just heard. Please." I tried to choke out. He shook his head. "Here's what will happen now. I will take my daughter away from here, and nobody will ever see her again. Nobody will ever hear her dirty tongue again. She might as well not exist as far as you're concerned. Remember that, or you might stop existing too. Okay?" "Help!" yelled out another patient behind a closed curtain. "Somebody get in here!" He may well have saved my life, because Jessica's father unhanded me at that moment and ran after his wife and daughter, scooting them out of the room. Hospital staff rushed into the ward moments too late. The security officers searched for Jessica and her parents, but they were gone. I talked to the police earlier. They sent someone around to the family's home, but there were no cars in the driveway and nobody in the house. They'd fled. What terrifies me is that my shift ends in a few hours. An officer assured me that I'd be safe, but they're hardly going to appoint a round-the-clock detail to me, are they? Nurses receive violent threats every day. There's nothing special about this in their eyes, and there's no concrete evidence, so I was told, to incriminate Jessica's father just yet. I would argue there's a wealth of evidence that something terrible is happening. That man wanted to silence his daughter by taking out her tongue. He was no doubt interrupted by his wife halfway through the assault. She managed to get her daughter away and to a non-local hospital, but he found them. He took them away. I fear, this time, he will finish the job. Above all else, I fear he'll come back for me.